Our next presentation is one that I know we've been talking a lot about here in Middletown. It's a topic that's broadly discussed across the state and the nation. Given the emergency teaching that has taken place in many school districts since March of last year, there has been concern and a lot of discussion about a phrase that it pains me to say, because I think it misrepresents the reality, but there's a lot of discussion people may have heard, learning loss. And what we want to quantify for everyone here is that after reviewing our specific students' actual assessment and achievement data on most recent assessments that they took just as recently as a few weeks ago, what we are seeing in Middletown specifically is more of what we have coined loss of learning opportunity, because our students, to their credit, given their resilience and their fortitude over this past year, to the credit of our teachers and to the credit of our parents who have really worked hard not to suffer learning loss, our students are really showing that they are holding ground in some ways, maybe not as much as we would hope. And we have definite insight into the areas that we need to focus on moving forward to help them recover those lost opportunities for learning that have inevitably occurred because of the nature of the way we've had to implement school over the last year. So I know Dr. Kerrigan is here with us this evening, as well as Mrs. Von Glahn, and I'm going to turn it over to them right now to go through some of the data. We are not going to go over every slide, but this presentation will be posted to the district website. It's already on the board portal, so you can feel free to go through it more in depth. They're going to give you an example of one slide in each section of the type of data we're looking at. Dr. Kerrigan, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I would like to echo Mrs. Pekas's comments about the resilience and fortitude of our students, our teaching staff, and our parents. We're very grateful for all of your hard work over the past year during these very trying times. Tonight, Mrs. Van Glahn and I are going to give a very brief overview of our district assessments and give you some aggregate information about how our students are performing. So first, the first set of slides we have are on the Linkit Form B assessments that we give in Middletown. And we thought it would be an interesting comparison to see how students did on the same exact test at this point in time compared to last year. So in case you're unfamiliar, the Linkit Form B assessment measures students' progress on the current grade level end of year standards. Form B assessments were administered in mid to late February in grades 2 through 8 for math and 3 to 11 for ELA in both 2020 and in 2021. Since the Form B assessments are given during the middle of the year, it is not expected students will achieve high levels of mastery on concepts they have not yet explicitly been taught. So that just means that a student sitting in grade 4 who takes the Form B test right now or in February, it's on the whole year's worth of standards. So we look to see how much they've gotten so far along the way, and also anything they might show knowledge of already on topics they haven't learned just yet, and teachers using information in ways we'll describe. So just to give you an example of one such comparison, we're going to look at elementary math and elementary ELA, and then we'll leave the middle and high school slides up for a later time. So we took a snapshot of our average score for each grade in 2020, right before schools closed down last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic, to where the students are this year in 2021 in the same grade. And I think you'll see by and large, even though it's a different group of students sitting for the test, if we just look at the test itself at the same time each year, our performance is pretty stable. And in fact, we even see some jumps in a couple of the grades.
And when we look into the ELA slide, you'll notice the same thing, that the green and the orange pretty much stay very equal. But what we do notice is that, and I do want to mention that we've been able to sustain students' learning with statistically insignificant differences between Form B when you're comparing 20 to 21 across these grades, the elementary grades. When we analyze the data, we did, however, notice, as Ms. Pekas mentioned, as she opened up this presentation, the loss of opportunities in the areas that have impacted the level of practice students actually have been engaged in when measured to a normal instructional day that we've had before we had to pivot to all virtual or a hybrid model, because we had to focus more on overarching standards and foundational skills. And that's where you're seeing, even when you dive deeper into the fourth grade, where you see it's dipping down just a little bit lower as opposed to your third grade and fifth grade, we can take a look at that. And as Dr. Carrigan said in the slide before, that these are skills that some of these skills maybe were not mastered yet because they weren't even taught yet. As like when I look into this and we dove deeper, it was the prose and poetry. And we know that we don't really get to poetry in all these elementary grades and even in the middle schools until April. So we want to keep in mind that when we're looking at this, even though we know there are those lost opportunities, and that we are looking for recovery for them, some of these dips could be essentially from not being taught yet to this time.
If you're interested, we also have middle school and high school math and ELA comparisons, and similar to what we see in elementary, they're pretty much even in most cases. In some cases a little higher, a little lower, but like Mrs. Van Gogh mentioned, we mine down deep to see what might be causing that, as we'll talk about on the coming slides. Just to briefly summarize, performance on test B to test B seems to be pretty stable from last year to this year. When we see that a student is falling a little short, we might identify them for intervention, whether it's classroom level or something more intensive where we focus on specific standards or skills that they need. And, generally speaking, there was a loss of learning opportunities in comparison to operating under normal circumstances, as we would expect due to the abnormal school year. And we recognize that, and we will address it through additional instruction and programs, both this spring and this summer. All right, so this is just a little bit more on that with regard to prioritizing standards and constantly looking at pacing guides, curricular calendars, making adjustments that are helpful to the students and to the teachers alike. The next series of comparisons are Form A to Form B. So on these slides, we're going to look at the same year. So students sitting in their grade level right now, how are they progressing from Form A to Form B, where both tests are more or less the same. There might be a slight difference on a couple of questions, but generally speaking, the standards are the same. They're just taking them at two different points during the year. Form A is typically given in October. Form B is given in February. And I think you'll notice again, within the current grade level, students are sustaining and building their learning as the year progresses. So the slides in this set of comparisons just show how the students are doing earlier in the school year compared to a little bit later on in February. And we can see that their learning is expanding. They are showing mastery of more standards as the year goes on. Mrs. Van Gogh, do you want to address middle school ELA?
So if you take a look at these, the different colors on this slide, you'll also notice that your percentage rates are very, they're very similar. There hasn't been that much of a dip from A to B. But again, like Dr. Carrigan says, it's the level of mastery that students are being assessed on when they take this assessment. And the thing is that we have to be, mindful that it's on the end of year standards. So it's towards the end, all the standards that these kids need to know by the end of these grades that they're being assessed on. And it's that Form A is giving us some preliminary information on standards that the kids are coming into the grades with and are able to, transfer those skills in their work. And then B is giving us more of a good idea of some of those skills that still need a deeper dive in, which is why we have that tiered intervention in case those levels start to slide down. And we identify that immediately. And our specialists do a really great job at doing that work for us.
So with Form A to Form B, I think it's important to note as you look at the slides later on that when we administered Form A, it was very early in the year, and there were many students at home due to the cohort model or for whichever reason. And when we administered Form B, we had a much more controlled testing environment compared to that of Form A. So we even think that the gains that we saw might in fact even be greater, because when they took Form A, they might have had access to more resources if they were at home in a more unmonitored situation. But with Form B, when the students were in the room or taking it at home through the Linkit testing app, we think it was a more accurate read of what they knew at that time. So we think that Form B really gave us more authentic information than Form A did. But in any case, we did see growth across the grade level for each grade level this year. The last set of comparisons is a cohort comparison. In this set, we look at the same students as they move from grade 3 to grade 4 to grade 5, etc. And it's important to note that, we are comparing different tests in this group, but we still want to make sure that our students are achieving at the same levels from year to year. So in this series of slides, we present school level information for you, so you could take a look at how students as a cohort are progressing from each grade. We wanted to highlight the middle school slides. Mrs. Van Gogh, for 5 to 6.
I want to add on to that, Dr. Kerrigan, and just also say that when you look at 2021, that was right before we pivoted to virtual instruction. So we had all of our kids in school still in a regular school day. And I just want, and then so when we look at the 2021, these are the kids that that were in that hybrid approach. And we had Form A, like Dr. Kerrigan said, which, kids were all doing at home. But Form B, for the most part, teachers had kids taking that assessment in the classroom. And so I really agree with Dr. Kerrigan that we did get some more valid data that we can really rely on and give us some information and help guide us in those lost opportunities, help guide us in drilling down and looking at how we can start to recover some of the instruction that might have been lost during those opportunities that we didn't have, like more practice and more writing and the things that had to go to the wayside. I don't want to say wayside, but I want to say that we had to crunch the time to fit in all the instruction these teachers have been trying to provide students through the course of the time that they had to do it in. So when we look at the 6th grade here, you'll notice the feeder schools into Bayshore seem to be a little bit higher than Bayshore right now. But for the most part, it's still, the instruction hasn't sustained in a way that students are moving and students are still being able to sustain the work that they were doing before the pandemic hit. And I think that's really important to notice with owning and understanding that we have work to do and that we need to move forward and drill deeper and prioritize the standards that we need to finish our year out in, and then start to plan for how we're going to provide those lost opportunities in the fall.
So in this series of slides, we have each set of 4 elementary schools and their corresponding feeder middle school. You could take a look and see how performance carries over from right before the pandemic to current situation this school year for those students transitioning from 5 to 6. And the same for math. We also see sustained learning from last year into this school year in even more difficult concepts. When students go from grade 5 to grade 6, that's historically a difficult transition for them. So we're happy to report that, in aggregate, the students are sustaining their learning from year to year. And when we don't quite see that, we mine down to the specific standard. So in grade 7, for example, for mathematics, we noticed that when we ran some of the Linkit reports, that there was a difficulty with equivalent expressions. So once we figure that out, then we meet, we talk about it in groups, and we make sure we revisit that skill through choice boards and differentiated instruction over the course of the year. It's also important to note, as you read the math slides, anything involving grade 8 doesn't include the honor students. The honor students take Algebra 1. So if it looks like there's this big decline from 7 to 8, it's only because all students in 7th grade take the same math Linkit, but in 8th grade, some take the grade 8 math Linkit and some take Algebra 1. So we are missing a whole group of students in grade 8.
I think, Dr. Carrigan, if we go to the tiered intervention, then we can hit the moving forward too, because I think that's really important. And just like something to note here, for your view later on, this is our tiered intervention model. We take a lot of pride in this model. I know that Mrs. Pekas and Angela Merrow and Mrs. O'Hagan, myself, and even Tara, Mrs. Garzone have spent a lot of time getting this into the classrooms for the tier 1 intervention and tier 2 and tier 3. This slide explains it in a little more detail. I don't want to read it to you, but I just want to make note that that this is multi-tiered and a multi-sensory approach that has really started to take hold in our primary grades. And I really feel that I know, and I'm confident that it's going to show once we're back in school, like start in next year and even this year. It's going to help us move those kids that need this, the tiered intervention, and help even our special ed kids.
All right, so once we have all this data, what exactly do we do with it? I'm sure that's on everybody's mind, and we talk as a curriculum department all the time when we review data, and we want to always do what's in the best interest of the students. So our goal is to roll out some summer learning opportunities this summer, in addition to our current offerings that are based on areas that we see students could use a little extra support in, such as writing, fractions, etc. We also use this information for the tiered intervention model Mrs. Van Glan spoke about, student growth goals, and in any type of pacing guide or calendar revision in our grades. To give you some specific examples, moving into this summer, we will continue to offer our traditional SOAR and AP programs, but we're also looking at offering additional opportunities for students to build back in some of those opportunities that they might have missed during the school year. And some examples are phonemic awareness camps, reading and writing strategy camps, book clubs, creative writing, math skills and strategies camps based on specific skills and standards we identify in our meetings. And then, of course, for the high school, due to that resequencing, we're going to offer the Algebra 2 Jumpstart again, in addition to a new Geometry Summer Jumpstart program. And last but not least, in case you don't already have parent access to Parent Portal, for Linkit, there's some information here that you could check out, as well as additional resources for understanding what Linkit is and just how to interpret some of the score reports. You can also access it directly on our district website.
So I think what we want to reemphasize very quickly is that we are no way trying to paint a picture that all students are meeting expectations or excelling. That's certainly not what we're trying to say here. But what we know that there are some students who are struggling, and they are going to require more support moving forward. And we are prepared to identify what that support is and what it should look like. And we believe we will have the personnel and the programs to do that. We do know that some students have marginal issues, less significant. And we believe that some of the summer programs and some of the resequencing and changes to our pacing guides will support them, as well as in addition to the traditional tiered intervention that they would normally have maybe been captured under. And then we have some students who are still performing very well, but maybe not to the level that they normally would. And those are our gifted and talented learners. So we need to extend their thinking. Because we have to make sure in the end that every student in our district reaches their fullest potential. We don't want this pandemic to have caused any reason for them not to. So as a district, we are constantly working with our teaching staff, our administrators, our specialists, our interventionists to ensure that we are on top of this data, drilling it down to specific students, specific grade levels, specific standards, to ensure that we are addressing the needs where they exist in real time.